Heath Ledger disappears for 6 months, and nobody knows where he goes. It's July 2007. Friends call his phone straight to voicemail. His agent knocks on his apartment door. No answer. His family in Australia waits weeks between calls that never come. Heath Ledger has accepted the role of the Joker, and something is happening to him that no one understands. The disappearance starts immediately after Christopher Nolan's call, July 15th, 2:30 p.m. Heath hangs up the phone and stares at the wall for 20 minutes. His roommate finds him there, motionless, like he's listening to something no one else can hear. "I got the Joker," Heath says, but his voice sounds different, flatter, like he's already rehearsing emotional detachment. Within 48 hours, Heath Ledger begins erasing himself from his own life. He tells his agent he's taking the role, then stops returning calls. His regular coffee shop in Brooklyn Heights doesn't see him for weeks. The barista who knows his order, double espresso, no sugar, starts asking other customers if they've seen the Australian actor who always sat in the corner booth. The gym where he worked out daily for 3 years, empty. His trainer calls his phone 17 times. Heath never calls back. Even his closest friends lose track of him entirely. Jake Gyllenhaal drives to Heath's apartment and waits outside for hours. The doorman hasn't seen him in days. But Heath isn't hiding. He's working. And what he's working on will fundamentally alter his relationship with reality. But what Heath discovers in month 3 will change his understanding of identity forever. Heath rents a hotel room in downtown New York, the Millennium Hilton, room 2847, and locks himself inside. Not for a day or a week, but for 31 consecutive days. Room service brings food he barely touches. Trays pile up outside his door, meals growing cold, untouched. Housekeeping is told not to enter. The only sounds from inside are muffled voices, different voices speaking at all hours. Other guests complain about the noise. Laughter at 3 a.m., shouting matches with no second voice. What sounds like furniture being dragged across the floor repeatedly. Heath is learning to become someone else entirely. But this process requires destroying who he used to be first. The first month, Heath studies chaos as a lived experience, not an academic concept. He sleeps 2 hours a night, then forces himself awake with ice-cold showers. He eats nothing but candy and energy drinks for 3 days, then fasts for 12 hours. He creates systematic disorder in his own circadian rhythms, his blood sugar, his emotional baseline. Heath is teaching his body to exist in constant instability. By August, Heath's physical appearance has changed dramatically. Hotel staff notice him in the lobby, gaunt, eyes unfocused, talking to himself in voices they've never heard before. One night, a security guard finds him in the stairwell at 3 a.m., practicing different ways of walking up and down the same flight of stairs for 2 hours. He was walking like different people, the guard later reports. When Heath does emerge from his room, he moves like someone learning to inhabit a stranger's body. His gait changes daily. His posture shifts. Even his handwriting, visible on room service receipts, evolves from neat cursive to erratic scratching. Heath Ledger is disappearing into the Joker's psychology, and there's no map back to himself. But month 4 will teach Heath something about madness that no sane person should know. His sister Michelle tries calling from Australia in mid-August. The person who answers sounds like Heath, but speaks in careful, measured sentences, like he's translating his thoughts from another language. "How's the preparation going?" Michelle asks. "Preparation?" Heath repeats the word like it's foreign. "I'm not preparing anything. I'm becoming someone who was always here, waiting underneath." The conversation lasts 3 minutes before he hangs up without saying goodbye. It wasn't my brother, Michelle later tells their parents. It was someone wearing my brother's voice, speaking my brother's words, but the person behind them was gone. Heath's parents book flights to New York immediately, but by the time they arrive, Heath has vanished from the hotel entirely. September arrives, and Heath moves to a second location, a warehouse space in Queens. 4,000 square feet of empty concrete where he can be louder, more physical, more dangerous to himself and others. The space has no furniture, no comforts, no connections to Heath Ledger's actual life, just mirrors, notebooks, and recording equipment. Heath spends 18 hours a day inside, practicing voices, movements, psychological states that have no relationship to anything human. Neighbors report hearing screaming, maniacal laughing, sounds of furniture being thrown against walls. But when police check, they find only Heath, sitting quietly in the center of the empty space, writing in notebook after notebook. The notebooks contain things that should never exist in any sane person's mind. Heath writes as the Joker, thinks as the Joker, dreams as the Joker. But unlike his accidental dissolution into Ennis Del Mar, this is systematic self-destruction with a specific purpose. He's not losing himself by accident. He's methodically erasing Heath Ledger to make room for something else. The notebooks fill with observations written in different handwritings, different voices, different psychological states. Some pages contain detailed plans for chaos. Others are filled with drawings that seem to move when you're not looking directly at them. One entry, written in purple ink. Heath is a costume I used to wear. Getting uncomfortable. Time to take it off permanently. Another, in red, jokes aren't funny. Jokes are the places where meaning goes to die. I live in those places now. By October, Heath has been missing from his real life for 4 months. But he's about to discover something that will make the previous months seem like preparation. His agent hires a private investigator. Stephen Kravitz, former NYPD detective, specializes in finding missing celebrities. He tracks Heath to the Queens warehouse within 2 days. I found people in psychotic breaks, drug-induced fugue states, complete mental collapse, Kravitz later reports. But Heath was different. He wasn't having a breakdown. He was having a breakthrough into something that shouldn't exist. Kravitz watches Heath through the warehouse windows for 3 nights. What he sees disturbs him enough that he advises the agent to involve medical professionals. Heath was practicing being insane, Kravitz explains. Not acting insane, not pretending, actually restructuring his personality, his responses, his relationship to reality. It was the most controlled loss of control I'd ever witnessed. Friends organize search efforts, but Heath isn't lost. He's somewhere else entirely. Somewhere most actors never go and never return from unchanged. The transformation reaches its peak in November. Heath records himself speaking as the Joker for 8 hours a day, then plays the recordings back while he sleeps. He practices the character's laugh until his throat bleeds, then practices it more. He studies criminal psychology textbooks and fills the margins with observations written in the Joker's voice. Most disturbing of all, Heath begins to lose time. Hours pass that he can't account for. He finds notes in his own handwriting that he doesn't remember composing. Objects in the warehouse move overnight, rearranged by hands he doesn't remember using. Heath Ledger, the person, becomes a memory he can access less and less frequently. But what Heath discovers about the nature of identity in month 5 changes everything he thought he knew about being human. The breakthrough happens on November 23rd at 3:17 a.m. Heath is practicing the Joker's laugh when something shifts. The laughter doesn't stop when he wants it to. It continues for 47 minutes, escalating from practiced performance to genuine hysteria to something that doesn't sound human. When it finally stops, Heath realizes he can't remember starting it. This is when Heath understands what's really happened during these 5 months. He hasn't been preparing to play the Joker. He's been creating space for the Joker to exist, and something has moved into that space. When filming begins in December, the cast and crew don't recognize the man who shows up to set. It's Heath's body, Heath's face, but something entirely different lives behind his eyes. Christian Bale notices immediately during their first scene together. I was trying to have a normal conversation with Heath between takes. Bale recalls. But he wasn't there. The person looking back at me was someone else entirely. Gary Oldman describes the experience as deeply unsettling. Heath would be perfectly professional, perfectly polite, but you could feel something else watching you through his eyes. Something that found all of us absolutely hilarious in a way that made your skin crawl. Director Christopher Nolan realizes within the first week that Heath's preparation has worked too well. Heath doesn't break character when cameras stop rolling. He exists in a constant state of controlled chaos that makes everyone around him uncomfortable. It was like working with a live wire, Nolan explains. You could feel the energy, the instability. It was extraordinary to watch, but terrifying to be near. The 6 months of disappearance have taught Heath something about acting that changes the art form itself. Heath has learned that complete transformation isn't about studying a character. It's about systematically destroying yourself and rebuilding from the pieces. It's about finding the space where Heath Ledger ends and something else begins, then living in that space until it becomes reality. But this discovery comes with a cost that becomes clear only after filming wraps. Heath can't find his way back to himself. The person who disappeared for 6 months in 2007 never fully returns. The reconstruction process fails. Some pieces of Heath Ledger are missing entirely, lost somewhere in the chaos he deliberately created. His final year becomes an attempt to answer an impossible question. How do you return to being yourself after spending 6 months systematically destroying who you were? Michelle visits him after filming wraps in March 2008. The person who opens the door looks like her brother, sounds like her brother, but moves through his own apartment like he's visiting someone else's life. Heath kept touching things, she remembers. His coffee mug, his books, his guitar, like he was trying to remember what they meant to him. The performance that results from this 6-month disappearance becomes legendary. Critics call it revolutionary. Audiences are transfixed and disturbed. The Joker becomes more than a character. It becomes a psychological phenomenon. But Heath pays the ultimate price for this artistic achievement. The months following filming become an exercise in psychological archaeology, trying to excavate Heath Ledger from the ruins of his own mind. Some pieces fit together. Others are missing entirely, dissolved in the acid of the Joker's consciousness. Heath's final year becomes a daily struggle to remember how to be Heath Ledger. He reads his old journals, studies photographs of himself, interviews his own friends to understand who he used to be. But the person looking back from mirrors remains partially, permanently changed. The answer to his impossible question is that sometimes you don't return. Sometimes the journey changes you so completely that the person who began it ceases to exist. Heath Ledger's disappearance in 2007 changed more than his own life. It changed what audiences expect from actors, what directors demand from performances, what art costs when pursued without limits. Future performers will attempt to replicate Heath's total transformation. Some will succeed. Others will discover, as Heath did, that some journeys change you so completely that the person who returns isn't the same one who left. Heath's 6-month disappearance taught the world that extraordinary art sometimes requires extraordinary sacrifice. The question nobody asks is whether any performance, no matter how legendary, is worth losing yourself to create. Heath Ledger found the answer in those missing 6 months, but by then it was already too late to change course.